On November 24, 1971, a man boarded a Northwest Orient Airlines flight from Portland to Seattle. He gave his name as Dan Cooper, later misreported as D.B. Cooper. Mid-flight, he revealed a bomb and demanded $200,000 in cash and parachutes. After receiving the ransom, he leapt into the night sky over the forests of Washington and vanished. No body was ever found, no identity confirmed. His escape remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. The story of D.B. Cooper begins on the afternoon of November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. A middle-aged man wearing a dark suit, tie and sunglasses purchased a one-way ticket for $20 at Portland International Airport. He gave his name simply as Dan Cooper. There was nothing unusual about him at first glance. Calm, polite, and neatly dressed, he blended easily with the other passengers aboard Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short trip to Seattle. Once the flight was in the air, Cooper quietly handed a note to a flight attendant. She assumed it was a phone number and slipped it into her pocket, but Cooper leaned in and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Inside his briefcase, he revealed wires, red cylinders, and a battery, convincing enough to make her believe the threat was real. He then dictated his demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck ready to refuel the plane in Seattle. If his conditions were met, he promised to release the passengers safely. The flight crew relayed his instructions to air traffic control, and soon the FBI, state police, and airline officials were scrambling to comply. For the next several hours, the passengers sat unaware of the true danger, told only that their arrival would be delayed due to mechanical issues. Meanwhile, the crew followed Cooper's calm but firm instructions. He was no ordinary hijacker. He showed no panic, no anger, only a strange confidence, as if he had planned every step with meticulous care. As Flight 305 approached Seattle, law enforcement on the ground worked frantically to meet Cooper's demands. Banks gathered the ransom, $200,000 in $20 bills, their serial numbers carefully recorded for tracking. The FBI secured 4 parachutes from a local skydiving school, though one was later revealed to be a training chute not suitable for jumps. Cooper had specified 4 parachutes, perhaps to suggest he might take hostages with him and to prevent authorities from sabotaging them. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Cooper allowed the 36 passengers to disembark once his demands were met, leaving only the flight crew on board. True to his word, he remained calm and even courteous. Reports later described him as polite, never raising his voice or showing aggression. He accepted the ransom money and parachutes, checked the bundles carefully, and instructed the crew to prepare for takeoff once the jet was refueled. His orders for the next leg of the flight were precise and unusual. He demanded the plane fly toward Mexico City at a low altitude of 10,000 feet, with the landing gear down, wing flaps set at 15 degrees, and the cabin depressurized. These instructions suggested technical knowledge of aircraft, raising suspicions that Cooper may have had military or aviation training. At 7:40 p.m., with only the pilots, a flight engineer, and one flight attendant aboard, Flight 305 took off again into the stormy night sky. Cooper directed the crew south over the dense forests of Washington, somewhere near the Cascade Mountains, between Seattle and Reno. He made his move, preparing to vanish into history. At approximately 8 p.m., as the Boeing 727 droned through stormy skies over southwest Washington, Cooper prepared for his daring escape. He ordered the remaining flight attendant to join the cockpit crew, leaving him alone in the cabin. Moments later, a warning light indicated that the rear air stair, the movable staircase beneath the tail, had been lowered mid-flight. The crew felt the plane shift suddenly, its nose dipping upward as if weight had shifted in the back. Around 8:13 p.m., the pilots recorded a sudden pressure bump, strong enough to suggest that someone or something had leapt into the night. When they finally landed in Reno hours later, FBI agents swarmed the aircraft. Inside, they found Cooper's discarded black tie, 8 cigarette butts, and 2 of the parachutes. The money was gone, and so was the hijacker. Outside, the Pacific Northwest wilderness stretched for hundreds of miles, rugged mountains, dense forests, and icy rivers. If Cooper had jumped, he faced violent winds, near-freezing temperatures, and total darkness. Many experts believed he could not have survived, yet no body was ever found and no trace of parachute or equipment was discovered in the immediate search area. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in American history, scouring the woods with helicopters, ground teams, and aircraft. They interviewed locals, checked hospitals, and followed every lead, but the forest yielded nothing. Cooper had vanished into the night, as if the storm itself had swallowed him whole. The FBI's investigation into D.B. Cooper quickly grew into one of the most extensive manhunts in American history. Agents scoured a 24-square-mile search area near the Lewis River in Washington, deploying helicopters, boats, and hundreds of ground personnel. They combed through forests, rivers, and mountains, searching for parachute remnants, money, or a body. Yet nothing was found. The investigation turned to identifying Cooper himself. The ransom bills, all marked with recorded serial numbers, were distributed to banks, casinos, and businesses across the country in hopes they would surface. For years, the FBI monitored transactions, but not a single bill appeared in circulation. Cooper seemed to have vanished along with the money. Witness descriptions of Cooper offered little help. Flight attendants described him as calm, polite, and soft-spoken, perhaps in his mid-40s, with dark hair and a neatly pressed suit. He drank bourbon and smoked chain after chain of cigarettes during the flight. He gave no name beyond Dan Cooper, a name mistakenly reported by the press as D.B. Cooper, which stuck. Theories spread like wildfire. Some believed Cooper was an experienced paratrooper, perhaps with military training, who had carefully planned his escape. Others argued he was a reckless amateur, doomed from the moment he jumped into freezing rain and hurricane-force winds. The FBI leaned toward the latter, convinced that no man could have survived such conditions. Yet the absence of evidence told a different story, one that kept hope and fear alive. In the years following the hijacking, the FBI chased countless leads. Suspects emerged from all corners of the country. Ex-paratroopers, escaped convicts, even drifters who bragged in bars about being Cooper. Each time, agents investigated, interviewed, and compared fingerprints to those found on the plane. None matched. Some suspects stood out. One was Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Army pilot, who in 1972 hijacked another plane in nearly identical fashion, demanding ransom and parachuting to escape. He was later captured and killed in a shootout, but the FBI ruled him out as Cooper due to differences in description and evidence. Others included military veterans, airline employees, and men with suspicious backgrounds, but none could be definitively tied to the crime. Then in 1980, a startling discovery reignited the case. A young boy camping with his family along the Columbia River unearthed bundles of decaying $20 bills buried in the sand. The serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom money. In total, $5,800 was recovered. The find confirmed at least part of Cooper's fortune had made it to the ground, but it raised more questions than answers. How did the bills end up miles from the suspected jump zone? Why were only a few bundles found, while the rest of the $200,000 vanished without a trace? The money discovery gave rise to new theories. Some argued Cooper died in the wilderness, his body and the rest of the cash lost to the elements. Others believed the buried money was a diversion, meant to mislead investigators. The mystery deepened, and the legend of D.B. Cooper only grew stronger. As the decades passed, the legend of D.B. Cooper evolved into something larger than the crime itself. He became a folk hero to some, a mysterious outlaw who outwitted the FBI and vanished without a trace. His daring jump inspired books, songs, and even festivals in the Pacific Northwest, where locals celebrated the myth of the man who disappeared into the storm. The FBI, however, never stopped searching. Agents pursued thousands of leads, from reported deathbed confessions to forged ransom bills. Each new suspect seemed promising, but each was ultimately dismissed. Some candidates had the right military background, others matched the physical description, but none could be tied conclusively to the case. Theories flourished. Some believed Cooper died the night he jumped, his body swallowed by the forest or river, his parachute never recovered. Others argued he survived and lived quietly under a false identity, perhaps even blending back into society unnoticed. The recovered $5,800 in 1980 only deepened the puzzle. If Cooper had died, where was the rest of the money? And if he lived, Why had none of it ever surfaced? By the 1990s, the case had grown cold, yet the fascination remained. Amateur sleuths dissected flight paths, weather patterns, and river currents. Some launched their own expeditions into the wilderness, convinced they could solve the riddle that had eluded professionals for decades. Each theory added another layer, but the central question remained unanswered. What happened to D.B. Cooper? By the early 2000s, the D.B. Cooper case had achieved near-mythic status. The FBI continued to receive tips, some credible, most outlandish. Dozens of men were named as possible Coopers, war veterans, pilots, even drifters who boasted of hidden lives. Each theory ignited debates among investigators and enthusiasts alike. One of the most intriguing suspects was Robert Rackstraw, a former Army paratrooper and explosives expert with a checkered past. His military record and resemblance to Cooper fueled speculation, and journalists pursued the lead for years. But the FBI eventually dismissed him, citing insufficient evidence. Another theory focused on Kenneth Christensen, a former flight attendant and paratrooper. A dying man allegedly confessed that Christensen was Cooper, but fingerprint comparisons and lack of direct proof left the case unresolved. Meanwhile, forensic advances offered new opportunities. The black tie Cooper left behind was re-examined with modern technology, revealing traces of rare titanium particles, suggesting exposure to aerospace or heavy industry environments. This clue hinted at Cooper's professional background, but no clear suspect emerged. Despite these developments, the mystery endured. Each potential answer unraveled under scrutiny, leaving only speculation in its place. To the public, Cooper was no longer just a criminal. He was a symbol of rebellion, daring, and the allure of the unsolved. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the active investigation, declaring that resources were better spent elsewhere. Yet closing the file did little to quiet the legend. If anything, it gave the mystery new life, ensuring that D.B. Cooper would live on in myth as much as in history. Today, D.B. Cooper's fate remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Theories abound. Some picture him perishing in the wilderness, his body and fortune lost to rivers and forests. Others imagine him slipping away into anonymity, living out his life under a new name, smiling at news reports of the FBI's endless search. The truth, buried beneath decades of speculation, has never surfaced. The legend thrives not because of what is known, but because of what is missing. Cooper's calm demeanor, his flawless execution, and his dramatic disappearance make him an outlaw unlike any other one who left no bloodshed, no confirmed victims, and no answers. In an era of political turmoil and distrust, some even celebrated him as a symbol of defiance against authority. Each new generation rediscovers the case, drawn to its unanswered questions. Documentaries revisit the evidence, books dissect the suspects, and amateur sleuths gather online to compare theories. The tie, the money, the storm, all remain pieces of a puzzle that may never be solved. What endures is the image of a man in a suit and sunglasses, calmly walking down an airport jetway, carrying only a briefcase and a secret. He became both a criminal and a legend the moment he leapt from that Boeing 727 into the night sky. Whether he survived or perished, D.B. Cooper secured his place in history, not as a solved case file, but as a question mark drifting forever through the storm. D.B. Cooper vanished into the night in 1971, leaving behind only questions, fragments of money, and a legend that refuses to die. Was he a daring outlaw who escaped, or a doomed man swallowed by the storm? Decades later, no body, no identity, and no truth have ever been found. His leap from the skies remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries, a story suspended forever between fact and folklore.